When someone goes missing, we often focus on what happened after. The searches, the theories, the questions that never seem to stop. But tonight, we want to focus on what came before. The ordinary moments, the routines, the last time someone saw them and thought nothing of it. This episode steps away from the dramatized storytelling and leans strictly into the facts. Because for many missing people in North Carolina, that's all the public record gives us. Some of the cases we'll talk about tonight are well documented. Others, well, they exist mostly in databases like NamUs or the Charlie Project. When details are limited, it's not because family and loved ones didn't care. It's usually because not every disappearance received sustained media attention. These are the moments just before people vanished. Rossana Miliani was 29 years old when she disappeared on December the 7th, 2005 in Swain County, North Carolina. Rossana was visiting from Miami, Florida. She had checked into a hotel near Cherokee. She had plans to hike. That morning, Rossana called her father from the hotel. She told him she was going hiking. That phone call is the last confirmed time anyone heard her voice. Later that day, Rossana was seen in Bryson City. She had rented a storage space. She had bought supplies. Everything about her actions suggested preparation, certainly not panic. Then she vanished. None of Rossana's belongings were ever recovered. Not her suitcase, not her sleeping bag, not her phone, not even her camera. A store clerk later reported seeing Rossana with an older man, someone she appeared nervous around. The man was never identified. A composite sketch was created, but no public identification followed. Now, as investigators continued to look at Rossana's case, another name entered the conversation. Not necessarily as a suspect, but as a possibility. During the time Rossana disappeared, a convicted serial killer by the name of Gary Michael Hilton was known to be operating in national forests across the southeast, including North Carolina. Hilton's known victims were often hikers or outdoor-oriented individuals. He targeted people in remote areas, places where isolation worked in his favor. Rossana fit aspects of that pattern, but it is important to say this clearly. Gary Hilton has never confessed to harming Rossana Miliani. No physical evidence has ever linked him to her disappearance, and no charges have ever been filed in connection with her case. Investigators have acknowledged the overlap in time, the location, and behavior, but Rossana's disappearance remains unsolved. And unfortunately, she came to North Carolina with plans, but she didn't leave behind any answers. Rossana's case leaves us with specific moments that we can point to, but the next disappearance begins with something even quieter. Douglas Eugene Dayton disappeared on June 1st, 2004, from Deep Gap, North Carolina in Watauga County. And according to his mother, Douglas was at his residence that day. He showered, he got ready, and he left later that afternoon, giving no indication that anything was wrong. Shortly afterward, Douglas's vehicle was discovered abandoned at a campground in the Deep Gap area, and that's where concern set in. His keys were still inside the vehicle, so was his wallet. They were just left behind. Now, investigators consider that combination, as you know, a serious red flag. But here's the other thing. Douglas was a large man, 6'3", and roughly around 325 pounds. Not someone who's easily going to go unnoticed in that area or easily moved. Search efforts were complicated by rugged terrain, dense forest, and proximity to the Blue Ridge Parkway. His case remains with the Watauga County Sheriff's Office. Douglas Eugene Dayton. Douglas has never been seen again. Wayma Lynn White, sometimes just called Lynn. Wayma was 44 years old when she disappeared on August 15th, 2002 from Asheville, North Carolina. The night she vanished, Wayma had an argument with her husband and left their residence. Wayma never came back. 2 days later, she was reported missing. Now, 5 weeks after Wayma disappeared, investigators discovered her wedding band and diamond engagement ring pawned at a jewelry store in Asheville. And records showed the rings had been pawned by her husband, despite his statement that Wayma was wearing them when he last saw her. Now, Wayma's husband was scheduled to take a polygraph test, but he never did. On November 25th, 2002, the same day the polygraph was scheduled, Wayma's husband mysteriously died in a fire at his trailer. Wayma Lynn White has never been located. Her case remains open with the Buncombe County Sheriff's Office. Some people disappear while everyone else is asleep. Darrell Todd Barham, known as Todd, was 43 years old when he disappeared on August 14th, 2005 from Lewisburg, North Carolina. That morning, Todd was asleep on a family member's couch. At 8:30 a.m., he was seen there, asleep. When his family returned home around 4 p.m., Todd was gone. No one saw him leave, and no one heard from Todd ever again. Now, Todd had a serious chainsaw injury to his leg, a detail that could have limited his mobility. But in 8 hours, Darrell Todd Barham was gone, and he's never been heard from since. The next disappearance happened overnight, while everyone assumed he was still inside. Ronnie Dean Royal disappeared on September the 6th, 2005 from Thomasville, North Carolina. Ronnie had arrived in North Carolina by way of train. His father picked him up and brought him to his residence on Ridgecrest Street. And that evening, Ronnie and his dad's roommate went to the store for beer. They returned home, and around 9 p.m., the roommate went to bed. Ronnie was still there. When Ronnie's father returned home around 2 a.m., Ronnie was simply just gone. No note, no call, no explanation. And despite distinctive tattoos that should have made Ronnie identifiable, he's never been located. He walked out, supposedly, and then just vanished. When Ronnie Dean Royal disappeared, what stood out wasn't just the unanswered questions. It was how quickly a normal evening simply unraveled. A train ride, a beer run, a quiet house, and then nothing. Cases like Ronnie's reminds us that disappearances don't always announce itself with chaos. Sometimes it slips in quietly between routine moments, unnoticed, until the absence becomes impossible to ignore. And that same pattern would appear again 3 years earlier along the North Carolina coast. In the summer of 2002, another man would vanish, not from a busy station or a crowded street, but from a place people go to disappear on purpose. This is the case of Kevin Perry Fields. Kevin Perry Fields was 44 years old when he disappeared on July 6, 2002, from Carolina Beach in New Hanover County, North Carolina. That summer day didn't begin with anything really remarkable. Kevin was a man familiar with the coastal towns of southeastern North Carolina, and at the time of his disappearance, he was believed to have been living in his truck, not far from an area locally known as the Gold Mine in Pasquotank County. And on July 6th, Kevin was also seen in Perquimans County, and at that point, his trail went quiet. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months, and no confirmed contact was ever reported. Then on September 28th, 2002, Kevin's truck was found abandoned in a wooded area of Gates County, North Carolina. This discovery raised questions. The truck Kevin had made his temporary home was left behind in a place that suggested neither a planned departure nor an expected return. But beyond the truck's location, few public details were provided about any personal effects, his last movements, or even witness accounts. We do know this about Kevin's public profile at the time, though. We do know he was around 44 years old at the time of his disappearance, stood 6 foot 2 inches tall, weighed 150 pounds, and both his hair and eyes were recorded as being brown. But beyond his physical description and the locations tied to his disappearance, very little has been publicly released about the circumstances surrounding Kevin's last hours. His case is listed as endangered missing in the NamUs database, a classification that signals concern for his welfare given the length of time he's been unaccounted for. Kevin Perry Fields has not been heard from since that summer day in 2002. And like many cases we cover, there is much we don't know. There are no public reports of a confirmed sighting after July 6th. There are no widely shared updates about possible leads, and no public resolution. What remains are questions, and the hope that someone, somewhere, might recall a detail that could change everything. Every person we've talked about tonight, well, they had a last ordinary moment. A phone call, a shower, an argument, a nap, a quiet evening at home, and a truck ride. And then, nothing. If you have any information about Kevin Fields, Rossana Miliani, Douglas Dayton, Wayma White, Darrell Barham, or Ronnie Royal, you're encouraged to contact local law enforcement. These names deserve to be spoken and remembered. I'm your host, Tim Eubanks. Thank you for listening to the Bunklesberry Lemonade podcast. And until next time, please remember to lock your doors, turn on your porch lights, hug a loved one, and stay safe out there.